Hello there, traders. Welcome back to the TOGS Trading Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. So here we are, TOGS TP number 46. Hope is not a strategy. So why are you relying on it? So, ladies and gentlemen, hope is a powerful emotion, but in trading, it is also one of the most dangerous. Hope can keep you in losing trades, can keep you blind to risk, and stop you from making the tough decisions you need to. So, in this episode, we'll dig into why relying on hope has been many a trader's downfall. So, let's dig into it. As always, I'm joined by a big Ian in Dublin. There, how are you
Yeah,
doing,
we do.
Ian? Looking good,
Fine,
Billy
thanks very
Ray.
much. All right, for the moment, although as I was saying to you just before we went on, my son is home. There's COVID in school. We got an email. He's home with the
Oh,
flu, so I reckon I'll probably have COVID by the weekend. The way
oh
things are
dear.
going, so it'd be delightful. It was much more fun in the past. I think because you got time off. I mean, two of the nicest staycations I've ever had were with COVID. I spent
Oh,
one,
really?
yeah, I spent one COVID period just stuck up in the room. Where's my office? Um, and I was there for an entire week on my own, and it was bliss when they remembered to feed. They didn't always remember to feed me from downstairs, but it was bliss anyway. I loved it, and I
Well,
quite happily do it again.
I wasn't so fortunate. I think I had a couple of days just before it all really kicked off, where I had a bit of a bad
Mm.
flu for a couple of days, and then basically, washed it off, went back to work, and then ended up working my backside off through actually COVID and stuff as well. It was like really busy time for me because, of course, everybody thought the world was ending and stuff, and everybody wanted insight into what was going on, etc. As if I would know any better than anybody else. I was just trying to build a picture and synthesize what I saw.
Mm.
So I'm glad some of us got to have a little cheeky break there, a
Mm.
little bit of time alone and stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah, so you've had a busy morning then.
busy morning. Yeah, as I was saying, I met another trader this morning for brunch, and that was it actually. That was my morning. So I haven't even really looked at the. I switched on the computer, but I haven't really looked at anything this morning, which is kind
Yeah,
of the week. I went for lunch with another friend of mine yesterday, so basically ended up
very
skipping.
nice. Yeah,
And
very
the
nice.
rest of the week,
Good to see
last
you
week,
getting out and socialising.
yeah. Um, the rest of the week was slightly weird with trading. I had two super trades, and that basically made the week, which made it actually a really good week.
Oh,
And and the rest of the week was crap, basically. So I had really good trades, which made it a really good week, and then I had a lot of getting caught. I got caught short yesterday, which was a pain in the arse, and I got out of that. But when you get caught in a trade, when you get caught on the wrong side of a trade, you're also missing the opportunity of going the other way, and that's the thing that actually annoys me more, because I have a way of getting out of those things. Because literally, you can generally all I do is I leave it to the next um, area, the next resistance. We say if I was in a short, which is usually the one I get caught out on more than I get caught out the other way around, and just leave it there till the next area, which might be a few points away, and then just add, and that will generally get you out because there's going to be a reaction there, and it's a high
mhm.
risk strategy, but it works for me, so I'm happy enough with it. You just need a lot of nerve, and you need a lot of time, and your account has to be adequately sized to take care of it, and you couldn't do it if you don't have the account to add significantly when you get to a different area. You need the liquidity in whatever market you're trading and all that kind of stuff. Like I wouldn't do it in oil. Oil, for instance, just doesn't have the liquidity, I think, to be doing that kind of jig acting. Um,
It's one of the other areas you and I differ in terms of
yeah,
trading style. Is you will quite happily add to a losing trade, won't you, and stuff.
yeah,
Whereas I just it's not in me and stuff. From what I've heard, I see that as kind of like doubling down. It's not my style at all. But as you say, it works for you and stuff. But
yeah. But I have
you
a funny feeling we work on different time frames. To a certain extent, I really tend
yeah,
to work
yeah.
on. Yeah, I tend to work on very fast time frames, and that tends to be, those have like they tend to be like there's a lot of we say higher lows, right? In any day, if you have a trend upwards, right, and you short and you get caught out and this starts doing a series of higher lows, one of those higher lows has to come back basically, and that's what because nothing goes straight up. And there's so many little things that you can do, and that's why if you're working on those really really quick timeframes, you can generally manage to get yourself out. And as long as you don't go in too oversized at the beginning, if you're going in oversized, you have to use a hard stop. There's no way out of it. But a lot of times you'd end up with what I would call an exploratory trade, really, which is a very small position size where you're aiming at where you have the suspicion that something's going to happen and you're just entering into it. And a lot of the time it's a lot of the time those aren't even really about money. They're just about exploring an idea as much as anything else. But anyway, hope
Anyway.
that's the
Well,
hope.
that's kind of not a bad point for me to sort of mention that next week's TOGS podcast, TOGS 47, is about building and improving your trading system. So, how do you keep improving your trading system? So, thanks to all of you who are subscribed and join us. If you haven't, please do. And as I said, I hope you'll join us for TOGS 47 next week. But today is TOGS 46. It's all about hope is not a strategy. So why are you relying on it? So what have you got to say about that, Ian? What's your views on hope being a strategy?
Well, all strategy starts with hope. That's the first thing, because it is a component of every single strategy.
Yeah,
If
fair
you
point.
don't have hope in something, you're going to end up in paralysis. You're just not going to move. So if you, which I think is a big social commentary as well at the moment. But I think that if you don't have hope, your strategy has to start with hope. You have to hope that you're going to do something, you're going to achieve something, and then if you don't have that hope, you're not going to do anything at all. Because there's two creators of paralysis, and one is a lack of hope, and the other one is fear.
Yeah,
Remember one day I got a great lesson with the paralysis of fear from just watching. I was watching some video YouTube thing about the Ukraine war, and there was two guys running. Two Russians were running away from Ukrainians, and they just got petrified. And then they just stopped and lay down. And the guy walked up and just shot them. That was the end of them, those two fellas. But it was fear paralysis. That's all it was. Um,
I hope
too
your
much.
son is upstairs watching these videos on your phone. Once he's off with the flu, not in
No,
Daddy's
no.
special
I spent
flu.
a huge amount of time actually telling him not to do anything, or not to. If he joins an army, he's going to spend his time living in a hole in the ground, and that's
Yeah,
it's not something that I
yeah,
think that.
been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't like it. I've been to the bog as a child. I don't need to do any more outdoorsy things. Um, Too much hope is just foolish, leads to foolish decisions. And the reason why I think people hope too much, what I've seen in my own dealing with people, is that they hope avoids work. Because if you hope that something's going to happen, if you go into a trade and you go in with just the analysis of simple hope, you don't have to do any more work in it. And I've seen traders who do that. They really just simply rely on hope to make up for strategy that they don't have. The second
Yeah,
thing is that if when they do lose, they employ hope again. And the idea to employ the hope again is that it will that they don't have to deal with the fact that they have pain now. And that's one strategy I've seen a lot of people use, is that this hope strategy. So this hasn't worked out. Let's not deal with the fact. Let's not learn from it. Let's just grind on to the next thing and hope that that works out. And that basically means that they're living in this sort of endorphin created false world where they really hope that something is going to work out for them. Hope doesn't include what not to do a lot of the
good
time.
point. Yeah, good point.
And that's one of the big reasons why it's not a strategy, is because it often you hope something will happen, but it doesn't tell you what not to do on the way to that,
Yeah,
whatever that
point.
goal is. And I think that and the last bit I make out of this one is people are terrible at probabilities.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that that's a huge big thing, because I was watching, those old Napoleonic films, and I've been up, I've handled these things, and you watch them and you get a bunch of men and they all line up 100 meters from each other, and then they fire round besses, which fire a 0.75 inch, 550 grain bullet at 1,000 to 1,800 feet per second at a time when there was no effective treatment if you
yeah,
got hit in the wrong place. And there's the social contract where you sort of have to support each other, and you don't want to face the criticism of being a coward, and perhaps the surety that you'll get punished for not doing it. But a lot of it is simply hope. They hope that it will not be them who gets killed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And if you're willing to stand in front of a bunch of guys firing, what is the equivalent of four 9mm bullets, or 4.4.5 9mm bullets at you, with no real medical care. And if you die, they will pull all your teeth out and make false teeth out of it for rich people. That's not good at probabilities. And even the lottery, which I am
yeah.
guilty of doing the lottery from time to time, but the lottery is a 1 in 60 million or something. That it's in there someplace written on the website about what the probability is of winning the lottery, and it's abysmal. You may as well just burn your money. It's
Uh, those guys. It's especially those, like you said, the soldiers and stuff. It's optimism bias at its finest. It's thinking that it won't happen to me; it'll happen to the other guy. And invariably, that is not a terribly good way to live your life. But to be fair, for young lads in the military, that is what the military relies upon. That a whole sort of thrust of optimism bias and stuff, that it won't happen to them, that it'll happen to the other guy, because everybody thinks they're immortal when they're 19, 20 years of age.
yeah,
And elements of that pervades into people's trading. Fear, greed, and hope. Those are the three main emotions. And as you pointed out, hope and fear are very much closely aligned. But people who know I'm always banging on that hope is not a strategy. You make a very good point. You do make a very good point that actually you have to have a little bit of hope when you're starting to build a strategy, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't do the work, and that's a fair point. But then that has to be replaced pretty quickly with rules, checklists, back tests, forward tests, to basically turn it from a little bit of hope to an actually a fully fledged workable method that actually has an edge and can deliver for you over the time. If you're not prepared to do that work in and just hope that it'll work out for you, well then you're probably going to be disabused of that notion pretty rapidly, I would suggest, when you come to put your trades on after a while and stuff. So it's that's one way that hope cripples people. And as you said, the kind of paralysis under pressure. People are kind of they're hoping for clarity instead of making an informed decision. And on the flip side of paralysis, kind of overconfidence as well. You get a few wins under your belt and stuff, and you think you've cracked it, and that you start becoming overconfident after that win. You think that this little hot streak is going to last forever. You hope it's going to last forever. That it's actually basically going to allow you to trade the way you want. All right, and invariably that doesn't end. That doesn't end well. All right. Invariably, what happens is people end up over trading in terms of size. They oversize the positions because they've had a little bit of a hot streak, hoping it's all going to go away for them and stuff. And then they start sort of running ahead of themselves in terms of how it's all going to work, out. So other ways, I'd say ignoring risk management. I mean, people will ignore their risk management. They will hope that the trade works. They're like, I don't need to put stop loss in. I've hoped that this trade will work out, or I don't need, or I can move my stop loss further away because actually I know this trade's going to turn. I, hope this trade's going to turn for you and stuff and what have you. So, what I always tell people is if, especially intraday trading, if you're in an intraday trade and you just suddenly start finding yourself saying these things to yourself about, I hope this trade wins and I hope this turns, and that in itself is probably giving you a good insight into your mental state, and also the likely probability of the outcome of that trade.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anything else in terms of the
Yeah. I
dangers
think
of
I was just
relying on
yeah.
hope in trading?
Well, I was thinking an awful lot of people use hope because I think people spend an awful lot of time with endorphin management in themselves,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
hope is
Yeah.
really the
Good point.
character the thing. And when they do the lottery, when you're doing the lottery, what are you doing? You go off and you spend your €5 on a ticket, but what you have for that whole week is the ability to dream, because you
Hmm.
have a chance, not a realistic chance, but you do have a chance. There is that it could be you thing
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. Yeah. Fair point.
and they are creating that, and that's what you bought with your €5. You didn't buy a realistic chance to do anything. You just bought this excuse to dream. And I think it's the same thing with trading, because an awful lot of people, if you understood the risks, if I understood the risks of going into trading as
Mm.
an unmentored retail trader, you wouldn't do it, because it's like 1%. And in that
Yeah.
1% of that top 1% of the business, there are people who are making a living and there are people who are making a fortune. But the difference between the guys at the top of the business and the boys at the bottom of the 1% is ginormous. So it's I think an awful lot of it is endorphin management. On the good side of hope, on the good side though, I think that you wouldn't get out of bed without hope. I think hope is the start of a positive mental attitude. And if you don't have positive mental attitude, you don't have anything.
I,
You read all this sort of stuff like, and they all start off with the thing that you need to start with is your positive mental attitude. And if you don't have that, um, as it says in one of the James Bond films, and yeah, the nice lady says, yes, you in surviving you need a positive mental attitude and body warmth or something. So I think that's the thing with that. So I think that's
Are we getting an insight into Ian's special mentoring style?
yes, watch the
Hope
James Bond
and
films,
hope and
model my
shared body
paradigm.
warmth.
Yes,
Anything for a cuddle.
I bought the James Bond Rolex. I also tried to buy it at one stage, and I bought loads of bottles of Dom Perignon. So I really feel
There you go.
yeah,
There you go.
could be
The
twins or
James Bond
something.
of coaching.
Yeah, Sean Connery's friends, I think, if he grew a beard and he'd managed to hold his hair, if he just um oh yeah, possible.
I knocked you off
Yeah, you
have
take
I
over for a
knocked you off
second. I
your
can't read my notes.
oh yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. I do
Terrible.
apologize. But you were, you were making some good points about
Mhm.
hope it is the kind of starting point of a positive mental attitude.
Yeah.
I can, yeah, I can live with that. I can agree with that. Okay, it's that kind of hope is a good starting point, but it is about, as you said yourself, um, you're making sure it doesn't fall over into delusion. That's the thing, that thing. You've got to manage that dopamine. You've got to manage those kind of woulda, coulda, shoulda in terms of, in terms about hope about how you do well, and as I say, use your hope to turn it into like a clear trading plan, with clear entries, exits, rules, okay, defined before you actually put the trade on. So, hope might be the starting point, but it has to be, as I said, it has to be overwhelmed pretty quickly by some proper structure and process to get you to get you working. Also, kind of the kind of discipline about risk, in terms of, rather than hoping the trade goes your well, but just basically making sure that you are a professional risk manager, so that you are always managing that risk, so that you are what's the word? You're immune, right? You're immune from blowing up, right? Which, if you are managing risk well with a good, with a stop loss and a small position size, you're immune from blowing up, unless the actual overall world blows up, in which case you've got bigger problems to deal with. Anyway, so yeah, I don't, hope might be the starting point, but yeah, it's channeling it, as always, channeling it into good ways that you can turn it into something truly positive by actually helping you moving yourself forward. All right, and I'd probably also be saying is, hope using it as a kind of using it as a tool to demonstrate kind of emotional awareness. All right, using when, as I was saying earlier, when you find yourself talking about hope when you're in a trade, that basically is a like a red flag. It's a warning sign, and using hope on being able to understand it when you're experiencing it as an emotion is that, is this, what is this? Is this fear? Am I being overwhelmed by fear, or am I being overwhelmed with greed? Using it as a red flag as a way and a means to basically give you some emotional awareness, to just help you calibrate yourself better, in terms of the way you're operating in your trade management.
Mm.
Would you agree with that?
Yep. I was also think belief is hope's older brother. I think belief,
So,
hope, yeah, because belief is basically super hope. It's a belief. You believe something and you hope something is going to happen is kind of the same thing. If it's a positive thing, I suppose, actually come down to that. So I think belief is and I think that belief, and to a certain extent, and hope. when you're learning to trade, or at least my experience of learning to trade, is that there are times in trading when you're learning to trade that you need a rational hope,
Hmm.
because you're sitting there, things will go invariably wrong for you. You will just have screw up after screw up after screw up. There will be months of things not working for you. And any rational person would go and do something else. And I think that then in my own experience that there are periods where you have to have almost when you're learning that you have to have a rational either belief in yourself or a rational hope. And I think that's one of the main. I mean, that's what all that grit is really, is a rational hope. So, so you sit there when you're trying to learn and everything's going wrong for you, and you just spend your time trying to, you get up the next day and you start again. And I was even thinking about it during the week, because I was talking to somebody else about it, and I was saying, like my worst moment in trading I've been going on for a while. Uh, like I went turn pro. I think I turned pro too quickly. And it was because the place I worked closed down and I had the money and I had the time. So I went pro, and it took me, so I had a couple of jumpy years that I shouldn't have had, that I should have been still working and trading part-time for. And I went in on some January, and I had a great January, well, in comparatively great January. And in the first week of February, I gave it all back. Just 3 days, 4 days of everything just went wrong for me in that week. And I remember on the Friday, I just went to bed, middle of the afternoon, just went, okay, that's it. I gave up. I'm going to bed. And I got up the next Monday morning and started again, and had to come up with ways to deal with that level of difficulty. And the simple level of difficulty was that when something like that, when was really almost traumatically bad in the period of learning to trade, I would give myself 3 days to mourn it.
Hmm.
So on the third day, so mourning or being sad or whatever is catastrophic thinking. It's you don't feel good about yourself, you don't feel good about your trading, you don't feel hopeful for the future, and your self-talk is your internal self-talk is not great. So I would give myself 3 days to indulge in that. And then on the third day, I had to start reintroducing positive self-talk and canceling any time that I ran into myself saying something that was negative to myself. And and I found as well with hope, there was a period where I thought, where it wasn't hope, it was just, I'm all in now, and I am committed to this, and I'm
Yeah.
going to succeed or I'm going to burn. And there isn't a third option, there isn't a plan B. And I think if I didn't do that, it wouldn't work, because if you have a plan B, um, it's very easy to go and move on to that plan B when things are going terrible, basically. And I don't think that is necessarily, that's not hope, because at that point there was a realistic chance that this would all go wrong.
Hmm.
There's you'd lose your shirt, you'd lose your time, you'd have wasted a significant part of your life, whatever. And that's not hope. That's just digging in for the long term, and putting it all on red, or whatever way it was to be, betting on yourself, really, I suppose.
Yeah.
And and that was it. Um, so I think
You make a
hope sorry, yeah. So I think hope is really important. It is important, but also, at some stage you just have to commit to what you're doing and decide that that's what you're going to do. Um, and an awful lot of people who try trading are hoping they're trading, and they're trying
yeah.
trading, but they ain't committed to it.
Yeah.
They're
No.
If it goes bad enough for them, and if it doesn't work out in their time frame, they're out of there. And thanks for leaving your money in the market. It was nice to meet you. I think
Yeah, no, you made a good point. Sorry to circle back a bit, but I like that belief is hope's older brother and stuff. Maybe that's true. I would probably describe it though, whereas hope is linked a little bit to delusion, or optimism bias. Belief tends to come from experience. You're building self-belief in yourself tends to come out of experience, tends to come out of basically, coming out the other side of catastrophic events like you just described yourself there. That's what kind of builds self-belief. And so, what I'd be saying to people is in terms of channeling that hope again, the way you build belief is you channel that hope in towards like evidence-based thinking. So, you start to learn and understand about probabilities, about game theory. You start to understand about particular patterns or particular setups that you've spread your net wide to begin with, but then you start to narrow down and focus on on what works for you, and that's evidence based, which means you need to be keeping good records, and you've been reviewing them to work out, do more of what works for you, and cut out what doesn't. And that I think is how you move from hope, just hoping this will all work out, towards actually channeling it into evidence-based thinking and decisions, which is what builds self-confidence, self-belief, skill as a drill. All right, that's how I'd be wanting to sort of portray it to people, so that they can see that there is a pathway. Most of us that have hope, and you are right, hope is, well, in life, hope is an immensely important element, but it's not something you can rely upon in trading. And it can be a starting point, but you need to basically channel it into ways and means to make positive progress. I'd
Yeah.
also talk about, in terms of that, turning hope into self-belief and not relying on hope. I'd actually probably also be saying about scenario analysis, right? Just basically talking through what if scenarios, right? I'll put a trade on. I hope it goes well, but what if X happens? What if Y happens? What if Z happens? What do I do? So that you're talking through scenarios and not predicting or forecasting. These are just silly scenarios, so that you know what to do, so that the likelihood of you being paralyzed by pressure or fear diminished, because you should know what you're doing. And then the more you do that, the more it becomes belief, because it becomes evidence based. You know that when I do things well, that basically builds belief, and that belief is what basically is what channels the hope into something better. I've always said for myself that I'm always happier when I make strong choices, strong decisions in trading. Might not necessarily be the right ones, but I just find that I'm better when I make a strong choice, strong decision, just make the decision and get on with it, rather than dithering, hoping it'll work out. Well, will it go on? Will it go? No, 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 no. Just basically bang, make a strong choice, get on with it, do it. If it's wrong, well, we'll sort it out in the debrief, we'll learn from it, and we'll review it, and we'll progress from it. But that has always helped me. That's always been kind of one of the cornerstones of operating, especially as an intraday trader.
I have a completely different idea. You aren't brought up Catholic by any chance, right?
That's why we're on a podcast. This is what makes a market.
Yeah,
Difference in opinions is what makes a
yeah,
market, mate.
yeah. Because I was brought up as a Catholic, and
Yeah.
so they believe I wouldn't. I officially left the Catholic Church by accident. When I lived in Germany, I was paying Kirchensteuer church tax, and I left. I didn't want to pay Kirchensteuer. It was 35 euros a week, 35 euros a month, or whatever it was at the time. That was at the time would have been a night out in Berlin. Catholics and religious people believe in something there is absolutely no evidence for.
Yep.
And that's what I mean by belief. A belief is an irrational. Belief doesn't need belief doesn't need evidence. Belief just needs, in my opinion, just needs a belief. That's all it is. I mean, if you look at half the stuff you see online about social issues and stuff like that, you have one side, you have the liberal woke side that believe stuff that is completely nonsense, and then you have the left, the right side that believe stuff that is not quite as nonsensical and is much more evidence based, in my own opinion. But that's what I think. I don't think belief is. I think evidence based stuff, that's a process thing. That isn't a belief. I
Yeah.
think belief is irrational. I think belief is something you have, like I have beliefs that are completely irrational, and I think all people have beliefs. I think all men have beliefs that are irrational.
Totally.
And I think that it would be the end of the human race if we didn't have irrational beliefs. There's a guy who wolf whistles at a girl walking down the street has an irrational belief that at some level that might work. You know,
Yeah.
there's it's just irrational. There is no,
I, I'm talking about self belief in yourself as a trader, and that is where I would see you're absolutely right. People do have irrational beliefs and what have you, and I might say that the people you talk about there earlier about, let's say, the kind of Catholics having belief, I personally would probably see that as hope. It's just another version of hope. But when I talk about kind of using evidence-based thing to take from hope to belief, it is about building self-belief in yourself as a trader. That building self-belief, self-confidence, self-trust, and really all of that comes from evidence based of you being able to do what needs to be done as a trader in markets, especially on an intraday basis where things are very fluid, very dynamic, things happen very fast, and invariably it is when people get themselves in real serious trouble as an intraday trader because they haven't done what needs to be done to build that self trust and self belief, and they're just hoping, spraying trades like Rambo spreads bullets, hoping that basically it'll work out for them,
Mm.
and then invariably it never really does. They might get lucky once or twice, but invariably it doesn't. And that hope is just basically it is clouded. Right, it's clouded their vision, clouded their judgment, and invariably it's been lethal for them. That's where I'd be. That's where I'd be
Mm.
looking at it.
I'd say hope doesn't start wars, but religion does, and the belief in religion does. Want to start a war, I mean, who's going to walk into a disco and blow themselves up with the belief that there's 70 virgins on the other side of it for them? It's just
Yeah,
slightly irrational belief. But anyway,
well, yeah, maybe not beliefs. That's just idiocracy, isn't it? Just idiots. But anyway,
yeah, young fellas, I just
that's
think,
a dangerous segue we could get ourselves into.
yeah, no, and just
That's a
I
whole
realized
different
I
podcast.
realized I shall stop in that way and maybe talk about the
That
Crusades.
that's a whole different that's a whole different podcast, that Ian, and
Uh,
stuff. And as we find as
yeah,
we go deeper into our podcast,
yeah,
we realize that there's a whole series of spin-offs of old man ranting podcasts that
yeah.
that probably the world doesn't need to hear. But I could be wrong. Maybe
Um,
I'm wrong.
don't know. No idea.
So
I think hope in trading as well, then it expresses itself as in overholding trades. That's probably the number one thing. So they get into a trade, they overhold past where their stop should be. And it's pain avoidance. It's because all of trading eventually boils down to in some way pain avoidance. Because you don't want to feel pain, and trading is painful. And all the mistakes. Like when I go out and I talk to newer traders, nearly all the mistakes they have are there's only two. There's process. They're process mistakes, so they don't actually know what they're doing, and then the rest of it is pain avoidance. If I look at any issue that I have in trading at the moment, it's pain avoidance. It's all me at some level. And the thing is that they're so subtle. I was just talking about this morning. That a lot of these problems are subtle. They're tiny, 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 tiny problem, tiny, tiny reactions to where if you were when you change your position size, for instance, or you go from simulator to live, um, and it doesn't work for you, but it works in the simulator. It's generally there's some often very subtle thing that you're doing different because you're afraid, where you don't have that same freedom to sit in a trade that you do when you're on a small position size. That doesn't affect you emotionally, or you're on a simulator or something. As long as it doesn't affect you. It's great. Um, I really should tackle my dyslexia and write my notes better with a better pen. Um, Hope can be temporary.
yeah,
That's what's it. Hope does not last forever. Hope lasts, eventually when there's enough evidence contrary to hope, to whatever you're hoping for. I hope I'll win the lottery, and then you see the first three numbers and they're completely different to anything that's on your lottery ticket. That's hope goes. And hope is temporary. So it's not, I mean, belief can be eternal, but literally, I mean, if it's a religious thing, it is an eternal idea, eternal idea. But hope can be temporary. And I think that's a problem. I think hope leads to what I think is one of the worst problems in trading sometimes, which is a spiral.
Yeah.
So you see people, the traders, and they go, especially day traders, and they go in and they start to lose, and they lose one trade, and then they lose another trade, and then they lose their connection with the market, and then they start throwing money at it. I had one of my own guys there blew up half his account, 10 grand, gone, um, on a spiral. Just pain avoidance again. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And then the next one was the Grail search. Hope puts you on the Grail search,
Yeah.
but you
Does.
can live on a Grail search forever. You know, you never really have to actually come off the Grail search if you don't want to. And for anybody who's listening, the Grail search is trying to find the absolutely perfect setup, the conditions, whatever, some perfection that exists in the market so that you know that when you press the button 10 times, 7 times, it will work out. It will work out. Two wins, one loss, two wins, one loss, two wins, one loss, and do that eternally, basically, till you decide to buy a yacht or whatever the hell it is. So I think the Grail search, it can overextend the Grail search. I hope I can do better. And just I don't like it. It's wishy-washy. I hope is a soft emotion. You know, there's nothing pushing you there. You know, I hope the sun shines tomorrow, you know. Whatever. It's just wishy-washy, go nowhere, do nothing, emotion. So I'm not a big fan of it. I understand that it needs to be there. I understand I need to know, and especially I think one of the big things as well is as middle-aged men, I think hope, the loss of hope in life is one of is probably our greatest killer. You know, I mean, if you read all the things, and you see it yourself, like if you're talking to a lot of guys, like a lot of fellas I meet that are my own age are dead inside. You know, they're frustrated. They've lost all the hope that anything's going to happen. They become angry because anger is just frustration. Frustration is just a loss of hope.
Yep.
You know, at the end of the day.
Yep.
So I think it's a terrible thing to lose, but I also think it's a bit of a wishy-washy emotion in some ways. Especially when you're doing something as hard as trading, you know, especially if you're not mentored. If you're not
Yeah.
mentored,
If you're not mentored, yeah, you're struggling.
yeah.
But then maybe that's maybe once again that's another podcast. Dr. Ian's waiting room and stuff. Come in and see Dr. Ian. We'll see you now, and talk about. No, it is a very. I make light of what is actually a pretty serious subject and stuff and what have in terms of loss of hope. Yeah, and there's lots of things I could talk about that and stuff. But as I said, maybe we'll save that for a different podcast for a different day. So, listen, let's draw this to a close, okay?
Yeah.
Because we said we would try and do these for about 25 minutes, but invariably what happens is once we get into our stride and stuff, then and the subject's interesting, then we can talk all day, can't we? So listen, let's draw it to a close. All right. Just a reminder as always. Listen, thanks very much for those of you who subscribe. If you haven't, please do so. Okay. We appreciate it. Okay. All the feedback and the comments we get, really fabulous. All right. Remember, the next one is TOGS 47, which is about building and improving your trading system. All right. How do you keep improving? So, yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully it's stirred up a few, maybe it has stirred up a few emotions. Maybe it's stirred up a few thoughts for myself. Just remembering that, hope can be uplifting in life, but in the markets, it's usually lethal. All right, a trading edge that comes from discipline, planning, execution. Okay, not wishful thinking. So market doesn't really care about your hope. It only rewards process. So yeah, so there you go. Something to take away to think about. As always, thanks very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Any final points from yourself, Ian? Any comments?
No, I did have 3 pages of notes, and I've come to the end of the 3 pages of notes. So
Boom.
it's me done.
There we go. Fabulous, fabulous. All right, listen. Thanks very much for listening or watching, tuning in. Have yourself a fabulous week, everybody, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon on TOGS 47. Take care and trade well, everybody. Cheers.